Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BodhiBrew, offering advantage through insight. I'm your host, Confidee Kong, Creative Director of Bodhi Research Group. In today's episode, we cover Women in Quantitative Finance with Chief Investment Officer, Quantitative Strategies of Asset Management One, Dr. Anne-Sophie van Royen, and our founder and CEO, Dr. Ranjan Bhaduri. We explore the challenges and opportunities faced by women as they navigate in the quantitative finance and trading arena. Dr. Anne-Sophie van Royen earned her degree in economics from the University of Oxford and completed her PhD in mathematical economics at the University of Paris. Prior to her current position in New York, she held the position of Senior Managing Director at CDBQ in Montreal, Quebec, and served as the advisor Tactical Asset Allocation in Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy a cup of brew with us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of BodhiBrew. I'm excited. I'm here with my longtime friend, Dr. Anne-Sophie van Royen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Anne-Sophie, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning with my old friend Ranjan.
And we first met in Abu Dhabi. This was several years ago. I had gone to see a sovereign wealth fund, and one of the folks that I was meeting with said, "You have to meet Anne-Sophie. She's brilliant and you'll become instant friends." And it was very true. I walked in to her office and immediately some very interesting discussions on liquidity and other interesting trading topics. I think that one of the things that I want to, that I want to bring to the audience's attention is the tremendous diversity that you have shown in your career, in that you've worked in different cities, different continents for pensions, sovereign wealth funds, hedge funds, banks. I mean, you've really worked with a wide array of different kinds of capital management firms, and you've lived in Paris, Abu Dhabi, Montreal, New York, Boston, Chicago. To me, if one is working in different continents and studying in different continents and in different kinds of these organizations, it really requires a tremendous ability to adapt, as well as obviously one is very talented. And this is world-class talent in some ways. So I want to ask you about the importance of culture, like in terms of being able to adapt to these kinds of different cultures, different regions, different types of organizations. Maybe you could quickly comment on that, please.
Yeah, sure. In terms of qualities that it takes, I think you were right to highlight that the foremost quality you need to exhibit is capacity to adapt very quickly. And sometimes, I moved to a new geography, a new company, a new environment out of choice. And sometimes it was just totally by chance. But in both cases, you have to land on your feet and you have to quickly learn the ropes, who you can work with, what are the parameters that you have to behave within from a cultural standpoint. So there are two dimensions to that. There's the explicit work culture that you're exposed to in a particular company. And then there's the wider culture that you're exposed to, let's say, within the region or within the country that you have just moved into. Sometimes it's a bit different and sometimes it has a huge overlap. For me, I guess that the biggest shock was moving first to the US from London. It was mostly because I didn't know the system, and at the time there was no accompaniment of expats.
Yes.
So little things like how to get a bank account or even knowing that we would get paid twice a month, for me was a huge shock because I had to learn everything on my own. Mm-hmm. On the other opposite, moving to Abu Dhabi, to the Middle East, coming from the US, which on the face of it would be so very different, was extremely smooth. Because there was a huge amount of expats like me, people coming from all over the place, whom I could reach out to and ask advice. And so the environment was there to facilitate this integration. So the context matters quite a bit.
No, that's excellent. And that's, I forget if I mentioned London, but yes, London, Paris, Abu Dhabi, New York, Boston, Chicago, and Montreal. Like, it's a very impressive list. And again, the sovereign wealth fund, a hedge fund, a bank, a asset management firm, a pension. This is really clearly a very big accomplishment. I also will state that, even though you don't look it, you're a pioneer in quantitative finance and in trading, being a portfolio manager. How has it changed? Like, it is important for individuals to adapt. It's also extremely important for organizations to be inclusive and to, create a good environment and a good culture. How has finance changed? How has the banking world changed from when you first started? Maybe you could comment on some of the challenges and obstacles to be female on the trading floor and so forth.
There's certainly a lot to unpack on that question, and it may lead me on a
Yes.
tangent, but I'll try to stay focused. Some things have changed and others haven't really changed. So the things that haven't really changed is that I think that there is still a remarkable paucity of female talent in finance. They tend to be working in certain areas from the beginning. So a lot of my colleagues, let's say throughout my career, female colleagues were working in distribution or in marketing, not so much front office, portfolio management, and certainly not a lot in quantitative investment management. When you move to the hedge fund world, it's even worse. So that's been, I think, a structural problem that it's up to the companies to address, but it's also for universities to address, and how we can change this little by little. Because if you have fewer women entering STEM programs or PhD programs, then you're going to have fewer women coming into banks and into funds as analysts. And then as you go through the years, well, what is the number of women who are going to make it to MD? I do remember when I made it to MD at Credit Suisse in 2009, you could actually feel the entire rank of Credit Suisse MD women pretty much into the room of a restaurant.
Wow.
That was not a lot.
Yeah.
And that was throughout all departments. So it's a numbers game, literally. Why is it a numbers game? Because as you work in the field, you behave according to what you observe. If you don't see people who look like you, who talk like you, then you're going just assume that it's an anomaly, that they may be there maybe just by chance. And in fact, it's totally the opposite. So something which is very important for me when I think back about the last 25 years is the fact that you have to assert yourself. You gotta take no for an answer, and you have to know the right environment where when someone tries to intimidate you or try to weigh down on you, not necessarily because of gender, because that would be too reducing, but because you're junior, because it's difficult to voice one's opinion. The biggest advice I can give is keep trying, find an angle to make that communication, because eventually it's going to make a difference. So nevertheless, a lot of things have changed. I was joking with a few friends that the dress code when I started was extremely different.
How so?
How so? My first job in M&A, back when the dinosaurs walked the earth, women had to wear skirts or dresses. So
Was this in London? Or?
It was in London.
Wow.
All of us had skirts and jackets, but it wouldn't have crossed my mind ever to wear pants into the office. And I don't think there was a written dress code. No, it was just the way we were expected to be. And one summer, an American analyst came, and it was the winds of revolution blowing into London. It was fantastic. And we saw these women in pantsuits. And we thought, okay, this is the reverse American Revolution happening on our shore now.
Sure.
Not that we followed suit, no pun intended, but it came as a shock that someone could transgress the code. So that was the most extreme, I think, maybe in terms of dress code. Another dress code I was exposed to maybe was in the Middle East, but this you can understand because of the culture. Women had to wear dresses that went at least to the knee. Okay, so no mini skirts, obviously, but there's obvious rules of modesty that makes a lot of sense, in a given culture. But we could wear pants. That is not a problem.
Yes.
That's only the face of it. So when there are dress codes, that was a big problem. Okay, I think the most difficult is not so much the obvious; it's the implicit that really gets to you. And it's a bit like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's when you go to a meeting and some people don't shake your hands.
Yes.
Because they assume that you're just the support, although you're the PM or the head of the team. It could be people asking questions to the guy next to you because he has gray hair and you don't. Or it could be just during the flow of a meeting, something happens and suddenly there is some sort of rivalry. You don't know where it's coming from, but you notice that the person in front of you is a bit more aggressive with you. There's a bit more rivalry coming up. So what do you ascribe this to? Is this because you're a woman? Is this because you're younger? Is this because none of this matters, but the person just wishes he or she had been in your shoes? It's all mixed. But the best advice, I think, is really to stand one's ground and just to move forward and not pay too much attention to that and to keep one's head cool.
Sure. That's sound advice for sure. It is, you mentioned STEM a little while earlier, and that has been true for decades, that there is a need to get more women studying STEM subjects, and there's been, in North America at least, it hasn't been so successful, decades ago. It's improving, but room for improvement. And it's very, very important to see more women in mathematics and more women in physics and more women in quantitative finance. And often the quantitative finance is coming from those subjects like mathematics or physics or electrical engineering. In France, it's a situation where I believe the culture for mathematics has always been more, in the sense that it's appreciated. I will give an anecdote about when I was a graduate student in Honolulu. I remember one time meeting a young woman coming from France, and she when she heard that I was doing my PhD in mathematics, she said, "That's cool," and I was so happy. I mean, I hadn't heard "that's cool" for the fact that I study mathematics ever before. But is it a situation that in France and in other areas that you've been to, that they are encouraging women to study mathematics, and it's doing a better job in some sense?
I hope they do. I haven't been in a high school class for a bit of time. What I do know is that it's the same problem in the US, i.e. being very rigorous, being very analytical is clearly one of the key values, one of the key areas that's going to make you successful in the French educational system. Okay. And that goes through, every single class, from the very small classes all the way to the baccalaureate. So it's basically groomed in us, it's instilled. This being said, if there are not enough women at the baccalaureate level, which is the last year of high school, then there's going to be fewer women in preparatory classes to prepare for business and engineering schools. And then there's going to be fewer women, again, in professional levels. So I wouldn't quite say that France is so much better. After all, there was always a lot fewer women when I was growing up in the sections I was in that were specializing in maths and physics. So there's always this implicit discourse that, even if they don't say it, maybe you should be doing humanities, or maybe you should be doing something else. Okay, and then you have to stick to it. I was very fortunate that in my family this was not the case, because they were all scientists from the medical side, or my dad was an engineer, chemical engineer, so there was no issue whatsoever. And if anything, I got all the support I got from my father to pursue this line of studies. What is interesting is that, in fact, I did not pursue an engineering school. I went to business school. And I was faced with catching up maybe 4 or 5 years of undergrad and graduate mathematics and related subjects when I entered the PhD level studies. And then what I realized is that all the training I had got for the 17 years prior to that had prepared me for that moment. So it's the structure, the analytics you get in your mind, how you approach a problem, and that comes from the education, the background, that helped me to say, okay, I haven't done this for 5 years because I went to business school. That's okay. I'll catch up literally in 6 months. And I did.
Sure.
So I think the French system is very good, I think, at instilling into you the method. And the method is very important because
Absolutely.
you will find this throughout your career as well.
And I'm going to use this to segment into a very important topic. What do you think makes a good quant in terms of financial engineer or portfolio manager, but just what attributes in today's world should a young quant be aspiring to have?
There's certainly the most superficial aspect, I think, would be the technical qualities, right? Knowing one's field, being well read, knowledge of a wide range of subjects that touch upon investment management and quantitative analysis. Anything ranging from statistics and mathematics all the way to portfolio construction, portfolio optimization. So it can range from the more technical to the most applied. Certainly these days, you have to be able to be very proficient at coding. Not necessarily because you're going to spend all your days coding, but coding gives you the liberty, once you have an idea, once you have an hypothesis, to go and test it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is absolutely crucial and what maybe differentiates the quant from the more fundamental side of investment management. But that's the technical qualities. I think a good quant knows how to step back and put things in perspective. Because at the end of the day, we're not doing pure maths or pure statistics. I mean, much as I like to read 5 articles of statistics before I even have my first cup of coffee, this is not what we do. We like to mathematize, to model, but this is finance. We're dealing with other participants, other agents. The system keeps changing. Central banks may take or may not take an action over the next 3 months. It's a complex system. So in order to model this, we have to be super humble about what we can do and not think that we can do more than what we can deliver. Okay, we need to be aware that we can only take so many simplifying assumptions at any point in time. We need to be able to understand what these assumptions mean, question them, test them, and if necessary, change tack.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. I definitely agree with your points. And maybe you could also comment about the qualitative components for a quant, because as you stated, a quant will be able to have that sandbox to be able to create ideas and test ideas, that coding ability. It's absolutely essential. But what about being able to explain the ideas and explaining the model risk to a non-quant?
It's crucial. And it's a quality that you need to demonstrate at every level, whether you're just starting at a field or whether you're the most seasoned investment professional. And the reason is that you always have to explain your ideas to someone who's not necessarily an expert in the field. It may be your boss. I think very often I have reported to people who were not quants. That was the rule, not the exception. Very often you have to participate in a meeting where there's a multiplicity of people in front of you. They could be coming from marketing, distribution, compliance. They are not quants. They do not know all the details of what you do or all the nuances. You could be talking to prospects, clients, so you have to know exactly how to pitch it. So there's always someone you have to talk to who's not an expert. So I think the qualities that you have to demonstrate there is be synthetic, be able to start at a very general level. So what are the 3 key takeaways that you want the person to understand? Develop these 3 ideas very methodically, but not necessarily in great length or great detail or great depth. Leave it for later. And be able to change the pitch, change the tone, so that if you feel that the person doesn't understand, then you can go deeper into that subject. So you need to have also some interpersonal skills to read a room, to see what's going on. And what I say to my colleagues as well, especially those for whom English is not their first language, because they face additional difficulties, rehearse in front of the mirror if necessary. The mirror can become your best friend. And this looks like extra effort, but it will give you more ease to start again, and explain this very, very well. And it makes a tremendous difference when you're able to achieve this. That's explaining. And I think the other quality is managing, because as you go further up in the ranks, you manage people. So this is what I do these days, a lot more than the rest of the quant stuff. Set directions for research projects. Very quickly be able to decide whether idea A, B, and C may lead to dead ends, but on the other hand, idea D may lead to something. So you have to reach the good balance between being directive and being highly able to listen to other people and provide the right level of encouragement.
In many ways, setting a research program is a little bit like portfolio management in that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but just in terms of trying to take ideas or develop ideas that might be short-term or medium-term or something, if it's too long-term, may not be practical. And so how you're going to deploy those resources and deploy the time and efforts of the research program is in itself a asset allocation problem. And so is that something that you have, that came naturally to you as you progressed in your career and where you started managing people and then teams? How did that develop, and how analogous is it to what I just stated in terms of asset allocation?
I think I kind of picked it up as I went. Of course, you can read books on project management, team management, etc., but nothing is better than actual practice. And the biggest component, I think, is the actual cultural setting that you're faced with, because people in different cultures will respond differently to being very prescriptive. In some cultures, and in other cultures, they do not want to listen to you. So you have to spend time on a one-on-one basis actually to convince every one of them that this is indeed the right direction to take, and then to organize the workload accordingly. So it is a very complex exercise.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. Now, in terms of advice for young women professionals or women who are studying in universities and looking to enter into the quantitative finance world, what words of wisdom or what advice do you have for them?
My first advice would be continue to learn and continue to progress, because education doesn't stop at the end of one's degree. Finance, and quantitative finance in particular, is evolving so very fast. And for the last 2 years, for instance, we've had tremendous developments in many areas. Sometimes that touch upon finance, but very often they touch upon other fields. For instance, AI, generative AI in particular. So people need to be able to always evolve, read, and exercise a high level of curiosity. My take on it is that if I stop reading at least 5 articles a week, then I'm not doing what I should be doing. Okay. And that's been the case for the last 25 years. So keep on reading, keep progressing, keep opening and broadening your mind. Second, you need to be super well prepared. And here, if I may be a bit cynical, because people may expect you as a young woman, despite your degrees, despite your achievements, maybe to be a bit less qualified than the guy who's sitting next to you. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you have to be prepared for that. So you have to be better. By how much better? I don't know. 10%, 50%, twice better? I don't know. Just be prepared to be even better. And third, as you start working, maybe pick your opportunities very carefully. Pay attention to the red flags, to the orange flags when you interview. Try to think of, okay, there's going to be the job, but what about the environment? What about my colleagues? Do I sense that they will give me latitude to evolve and to progress? Or am I going to be boxed in? Because that's going to have huge impact for the rest of your career and how long you're going to stay in that first job as well. And related to that, maybe the last advice, which may be the most important, be ready to say no and to stand your ground. And try to assert yourself, voice your opinion nicely, respectfully, but be able to voice your opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for these words of wisdom and these nuggets of wisdom. This has been a pleasure to speaking with you, Anne-Sophie.
Thank you so much, Ranjan. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to the Bodhi Research Group for inviting me today.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to BodhiBrew.